You're standing over your coneflowers right now, and something feels off. The stems are bowing, the petals hang limp in the July heat. You reach for the watering can, you give them a good long drink, and by the next morning they look worse, not better. I know that exact feeling in my stomach, that little jolt of panic. Here's the truth most gardeners never hear. What you're reading as thirst is almost never thirst. And the harder you try to fix it the usual way, the faster you can lose a plant you've loved for years. I learned that the hard way. 3 summers ago, I nearly killed a purple coneflower I had grown for 9 years, a clump the size of a bushel basket, because I trusted my eyes instead of the plant. So let's do this together. I'm going to walk you through the warning signs one at a time, like clues, and rule out the wrong answers everyone jumps to first. And by the end, I'll show you the buried cause the old prairie growers understood, and the mainstream guides still get backwards. It's something you can fix this weekend, in about 10 minutes, and it works just as well on a mature clump as it does on a young one. The folks at the Missouri Botanical Garden hint at it, but almost nobody connects the dots. So let's start reading your plant. The first clue is the one that fooled me completely. The midday droop. You walk out around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun is hammering down, and your coneflowers look like they've given up. The leaves go soft, the flower heads tilt, everything sags toward the ground, like the plant is fainting. Now, every instinct you have screams the same word: water. It looks thirsty, so you water it. That's what I did. I watered mine every single afternoon that July, sometimes twice, because I couldn't stand to watch them suffer. But here's the first thing I need you to understand. A coneflower is not a fern, and it is not a hydrangea. It is a prairie plant. Its ancestors grew wild across the open grasslands of the American Midwest, in places like Kansas and Nebraska, where the summer sun is brutal and rain can vanish for weeks. Echinacea, the botanical name, comes from the Greek word for hedgehog, echinos, because of that spiky central cone. But the part that matters to you is the root. Underneath that plant is a deep, thick taproot that drives straight down, sometimes more than 2 feet, hunting for water far below the surface. That taproot is a survival machine. It was built to handle drought. So when your coneflower wilts a little in the worst heat of the afternoon, that is not always a cry for help. That is the plant doing exactly what prairie plants do. It relaxes its leaves in the peak sun to slow down water loss, and then it perks right back up in the cool of the evening. That daily rhythm is completely normal. Here is the simple test I wish someone had given me. Go out in the early morning, around 7 o'clock, before the sun is high. If your coneflower is standing tall and firm at that hour, then the afternoon droop is just heat, and the plant is fine. Do not water it, walk away. You will do more harm than good. But if your coneflower is still wilted and soft in the cool of the morning, when it should be at its strongest, then you have a real problem. Something deeper is wrong. And that is where my story took a dark turn, because my plant stopped perking up in the mornings too, and I still misread what it was telling me. So let's follow that clue further, because the next symptom is where most people make the mistake that actually shortens the life of the plant. Look at the lower leaves on your coneflower, right down near the base of the stems. Are they going pale? Yellowing from the tips inward, maybe a little mottled, while the top of the plant still looks green? This is the second clue, and it sends 9 out of 10 gardeners running in exactly the wrong direction. Because yellow leaves to most of us mean one thing: hunger. The plant looks starved, so we feed it. We reach for the fertilizer, the granular stuff, the liquid feed, whatever's in the shed, and we give it a big dose to green it back up. I've done it. I stood there with a box of high nitrogen feed thinking I was rescuing my coneflower. I was actually poisoning it with kindness. Here's what took me years to accept. Coneflowers do not want rich food. They are lean soil plants. Out on that native prairie, the soil is not pampered garden loam stuffed with compost and fertilizer. It's tough, gritty, and low in nutrients. That is the exact condition these plants evolved to thrive in. When you pour rich fertilizer onto a coneflower, especially anything heavy in nitrogen, you don't get more flowers. You get the opposite. You get tall, soft, floppy growth. The stems shoot up weak and can't hold themselves, so they flop over and split apart in the middle, leaving a bare, ugly hole in the center of the clump. The plant pours all its energy into leaves instead of blooms, so you get fewer flowers, not more. And that soft, sappy new growth is exactly what aphids and disease love best. The horticulture folks at Missouri Botanical Garden say it plainly. Coneflowers tolerate poor, dry soils, and they do not need rich conditions. Too much fertility, too much water, and too much shade are the three things that make them decline. Read that again. Too much, not too little. These are plants that are far more often killed by generosity than by neglect. So what do you actually do about those yellowing lower leaves? First, stop feeding. Put the fertilizer away for the rest of the season. If your soil is already rich, that yellowing is often the plant simply shedding its oldest, lowest leaves, which is natural as summer goes on. Pinch those tired lower leaves off, get some air moving around the base, and let the plant focus its strength upward. If you feel you must feed it all, a single light top dressing of compost in early spring is all a coneflower ever needs for the whole year. That's it. One gentle handful of compost around the base once a year. Anything more, and you're working against the plant's nature. I want you to feel the relief in that. If you've been fussing over your coneflowers, feeding them, watering them, hovering over them, you can stop. They want to be left a little bit hungry and a little bit thirsty. That's when they bloom their hearts out. But easing off the food and water only fixes the plant if the trouble is above the ground. And there's one symptom I need you to check for right now that isn't about feeding or watering at all. It's the strangest, most unsettling thing a coneflower can do, and when I first saw it on a neighbor's plant, I honestly thought it was a beautiful new variety. It wasn't. It was a warning. Go and look at the flower cones themselves. The central cone, that spiky dome in the middle of each bloom, is anything odd growing out of it? Little green tufts, almost like tiny leaves sprouting from the center of the flower? Are the petals stunted, twisted, or a strange, sickly yellow-green instead of their normal color? Are some blooms deformed, lopsided, growing new little flowers right out of the middle of old ones? If you see that, stop and pay close attention, because this is the third clue, and it is the one almost everybody misreads as something charming or harmless. I remember standing at my neighbor Carol's fence, looking at a coneflower with these weird green growths bursting out of the cones, and I said, "Oh, how unusual. Is that a new fancy type?" Carol was thrilled with it. She thought she'd gotten lucky with a mutant. What that plant actually had was a disease called aster yellows. Aster yellows is not a fungus, and it's not something you fix with spray. It is caused by a tiny organism called a phytoplasma, and it gets carried from plant to plant by leafhoppers, those little wedge-shaped insects that jump when you brush the foliage. When a leafhopper feeds on an infected plant and then feeds on your coneflower, it passes the infection right into the sap. The plant's normal signals go haywire. Instead of making proper flowers, it starts making these deformed green tufts and witch's broom clusters. The blooms come out distorted, greenish, and sterile. Here is the hard part, I have to tell you honestly, because a real friend wouldn't sugarcoat it. There is no cure for aster yellows. You cannot feed it away or spray it away. And if you leave that infected plant in the ground, the leafhoppers will keep feeding on it and carrying that infection to your other coneflowers and to your asters, your marigolds, your zinnias, and more. University extension services across the country, from the Midwest right through to the coasts, all give the same advice. The moment you confirm aster yellows, dig the infected plant out and destroy it. Do not compost it. Get it away from your healthy plants. It sounds harsh, I know, but pulling one plant now can save the entire bed. The good news, and there is good news, is that aster yellows is not that common in most gardens, and it is easy to tell apart from everything else once you know the signs. Deformed, tufted, greenish blooms mean disease. But simple wilting, yellow lower leaves, or fewer flowers on normal-looking blooms, that is not aster yellows. That is one of the fixable problems we've been talking about, and those you can turn around this very week. And that, my dear, is the whole art of it. Learning to tell the difference between a symptom you can fix and one you cannot, before your own kindness does the damage. Everything I have just walked you through, the morning test, the lean soil, the crowns that must breathe, I have written down properly in 3 books, laid out plant by plant and month by month for hostas, hydrangeas, peonies, roses, clematis, and daylilies, as well as coneflowers. Not for beginners planting a first border, but for people like you and me, with old clumps we inherited or planted decades ago and refuse to lose. They go far deeper than a video ever can, with the diagnosis checklists, the deep soak rhythm, the record keeping the old extension growers used, and the calendar that tells you exactly what to cut, what to feed, and what to leave standing so next spring still gives you flowers. To get all three, scan the QR code right there on your screen or use the link in the description or the pinned comment. Now, back to your plants. So if you checked your cones and they look normal, exhale. You dodged the scariest one. But that leads me straight to the question I get more than any other, and it's probably the reason you clicked on this video in the first place. What about the coneflower that's already struggling? The mature clump that used to be glorious and now looks tired, thin, and half-hearted? The plant you've had for years and are terrified you've already lost? That's who this next part is for. I want to talk directly to you now, the gardener with the old, established coneflower that's clearly not what it used to be. Because I've been exactly where you are, standing over a clump I'd nurtured for the better part of a decade, convinced I'd left it too late. Let me tell you what I saw in my own plant that third summer. The middle had gone bare and woody, with all the growth pushed out to a ring around the edge, like a donut. The flowers were smaller than they used to be, and there were fewer of them. Some stems flopped flat. And in the worst heat, it wasn't perking back up in the mornings anymore. Now, the first thing you need to hear is this. A coneflower going thin and hollow in the center is almost never dying. It's telling you it's crowded and overgrown. This is one of the most misread signals in the whole garden, because it looks like decline, but it's really the plant asking to be split. Most coneflowers naturally want dividing every 3 to 4 years. Over time, the clump expands outward. The old center gets woody and exhausted, and the plant chokes on its own crowding. When you see that bare middle, that donut shape, that is not a death sentence. That is a plant begging for a fresh start. Now, the textbook time to divide coneflowers is early spring or early autumn, when the weather is cool and the plant isn't in the stress of full bloom. And if you can wait until September or until next April, that is the gentlest way to do it. I won't pretend otherwise. But if your clump is really suffering right now, there are 2 things you can do this July that will bring it back without waiting. The first is a rescue trick that feels wrong the first time you try it, and I promise you it works. Cut the whole plant back, not to the ground, but by about a third, maybe a little more if it's badly flopped. Take those long, weak, floppy stems and shorten them with clean shears. I know, it feels like you're throwing away flowers. The first time I did it, my hand was shaking. But here's what happens. Within 2 to 3 weeks, that coneflower pushes out fresh, sturdy, compact new growth from lower down, and it comes back bushier, stronger, and with a whole new flush of blooms heading into late summer and fall. You trade a few sad, floppy flowers now for a strong, blooming plant in August and September. The second rescue is about how you deadhead, and this one changes everything about how long your coneflowers bloom. Most people, when they deadhead, just snip the dead flower off right at the top of the stem, leaving a bare stick poking up. That does almost nothing. The real trick is to follow that spent flower stem down the plant until you reach the first set of leaves or the first little side bud and cut just above that point. That side bud is where the next flower is waiting. By cutting back to it, you're telling the plant, don't make seed yet, make me another bloom. Do that consistently through July, and you can keep a coneflower flowering for weeks longer than it would on its own. There's an old bit of wisdom here worth mentioning. Gardeners on the prairie and in the Great English Borders both figured out long ago that a summer trim, sometimes called a chop, done in late spring or very early summer, keeps these tall daisies compact and blooming instead of leggy and flopping. It's the same principle. A well-timed cut is not cruelty. It's how you get more. So even if your plant looks like a lost cause today, with that hollow middle and those floppy stems, you very likely have not lost it. Cut it back, deadhead it properly to the side buds, ease off the food and water, and give it a few weeks. I've watched a clump I'd nearly given up on come roaring back before the first frost. But here's the thing that kept nagging at me, even after I learned all of this. Because I did everything right. I stopped overfeeding, I stopped drowning it in the afternoons, I cut it back, and that one particular clump, my 9-year-old plant, still kept sliding. Still soft in the mornings, still wilting when it had no business wilting. And that's when I finally found the buried cause that nobody had told me, the real answer hiding underneath all the obvious ones. Let me tell you what I finally uncovered, because this is the clue that solves the whole mystery. Remember the very first symptom we talked about? The wilting that doesn't recover in the cool morning? That is the single most dangerous signal a coneflower can send, and here's the cruel twist. It looks exactly like thirst, but it is very often the opposite. It is drowning. I got down on my knees and I dug my fingers into the soil right at the base of that plant, right at the crown where the stems meet the roots. And the soil there was wet, soggy, cool and damp even in the middle of a hot July day. I pushed the mulch aside, the good thick layer of mulch I'd so carefully piled up around the base to keep it moist, and underneath the crown of the plant was dark, soft, and rotting. That was it. That was the real killer. Crown rot and root rot from a wet, smothered crown. Here's what had happened, and I'd bet good money it's happening to some of you watching right now. I had been such a devoted gardener. I'd mulched heavily, right up against the stems, to protect my precious plant. And I'd watered faithfully every time it drooped. But a coneflower's deep taproot cannot sit in constant moisture. When that crown, the vital point, where root meets stem, stays wet and airless day after day, it rots. And a rotting crown can't move water up to the leaves. So the plant wilts, which looks like thirst. So the loving gardener waters it more, which makes the rot worse, which makes it wilt more. It's a death spiral, and the plant's own warning sign tricks you into speeding it up. I was killing my coneflower with the watering can, one caring gesture at a time. This is the piece the mainstream guides consistently get wrong or leave out. They tell you coneflowers are easy and drought tolerant, which is true, and then in the same breath they show you mulching thick, right up to the stem and watering at the first sign of wilt. Those two things together are exactly what rots the crown. The horticulturists at Missouri Botanical Garden are careful to name it. They warn that coneflowers can suffer from crown rot and root rot in wet, poorly drained conditions, and that too much moisture is a leading cause of their decline. The prairie growers never had this problem, because prairie soil drains fast and the crowns stay dry and open to the air. We recreate the disease in our gardens with our kindness and our mulch. Now here is the fix, and it is so simple it will almost make you angry that nobody told you sooner. You can do this in 10 minutes this weekend. First, go to every coneflower you own and pull the mulch back away from the crown. Clear a ring of bare soil around the base of each plant, about 3 to 4 inches wide, so the crown and the base of the stems are open to the air and can dry out. Mulch is fine further out, over the root zone, but it must never pile up against the crown. That one move alone saves more coneflowers than any feeding or spraying ever will. Second, stop watering established coneflowers on a schedule. For a mature plant that's been in the ground more than a year, that deep taproot is finding its own water. Only water if you've had a genuine drought, 2 or 3 weeks with no rain, and even then, water deeply once and then leave it alone. Let the top few inches of soil dry out completely between waterings. Feel the soil with your fingers before you ever reach for the hose. Dry an inch down is exactly what a coneflower wants. Third, if you have a plant with a crown that's already gone soft and rotten, and the whole thing is collapsing, don't just water it and hope. Dig it up. Look at the roots. If parts of that thick taproot and crown are firm and pale and healthy, you can cut away the soft, dark, rotten portions with a clean knife and replant the good pieces high in a spot with fast-draining soil, with the crown right at the surface, never buried. I saved half of my old clump exactly that way. The rotten half went in the bin. The firm half went back into gritty, well-drained soil with its crown proud of the ground, and it lived. And if your soil is naturally heavy clay that holds water like a bathtub, this is the year to think about raising your coneflowers up. Plant them on a slight mound, or mixing grit and coarse sand to open up the drainage, or move them to the highest, driest, sunniest spot you have. Full sun, at least 6 hours a day, and sharp drainage. Give a coneflower those two things and it will outlive you. Do you feel how it all fits together now? The midday droop that scared you, the yellow lower leaves that looked like hunger, the floppy stems, the fewer flowers, the tired old clump. Underneath so many of these, the real story is the same. These are tough prairie survivors, and we've been treating them like fragile invalids. We feed them when they want lean soil. We water them when they want to be dry. We mulch their crowns when they need air. Every kind thing we do from habit is the opposite of what the plant is quietly asking for. The moment I stopped trying so hard, the moment I pulled back the mulch and put down the watering can and let that plant be the tough thing it was born to be, it came back to me. The next summer, that clump threw up more blooms than it had in years. Standing tall and firm, humming with bees from morning to night, holding its flowers upright even in the worst of the July heat. So here's what I want you to carry with you. Your coneflower isn't fragile, and it isn't beyond saving. It's been sending you clear signals all along. You just needed someone to translate them. And now, when you walk out to that plant tomorrow morning and you look at the droop or the leaves or the crown, you won't panic and you won't guess. You'll read it. You'll know the difference between a plant that's thirsty and a plant that's drowning, between a plant that's hungry and a plant that's been overfed, between a harmless afternoon slump and a crown quietly rotting under the mulch. That's the difference between a gardener who loses a beloved plant every few years and wonders why, and a gardener who keeps the same coneflower thriving for a decade and more. You are the second kind now. You're the kind who refuses to lose a plant you've poured years of love into because you finally understand what it's telling you. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to answer this one. Go out and look at your coneflowers today and tell me which clue you spotted. Was it the midday droop that wouldn't recover by morning? The yellow lower leaves? The floppy, hollow center? Or did you push back the mulch and find a damp, dark crown hiding underneath? Tell me in the comments which symptom you found on your own plant. I read them, and I answer as many as I can, so don't be shy. And while you're there, tell me where in the world you're gardening from, whether it's a hot border in Texas or a damp bed in the north of England, because your climate changes the game, and I love knowing who I'm talking to. If this helped you, look at your coneflowers with new eyes. Come along with me. This isn't about following a channel. It's about joining a whole group of gardeners who are learning to actually read our plants instead of guessing and hoping and losing them. That's what we do here, and I'll tell you what's coming next, because I don't want you to miss it. Next, I'm going to walk you through the exact same kind of mystery with hostas, and the 1 August symptom, those ragged, chewed, yellowing leaves that almost everyone blames on slugs when the real culprit is something else entirely, something hiding right under the surface. Once you see it, you'll never misread a hosta again. Until then, put down the watering can, pull back that mulch, and trust the tough little prairie plant you've got. It's stronger than you think. And so are you. Before you go, one more thing. Everything I showed you today was just the overview. Inside my membership, the Blooming Garden Circle, I walk you through the full root rot rescue, picking up right where we stopped. And in there, you can ask me your own question, and I answer you myself, a real person. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime with one click. Now that your coneflowers are thriving, let's help your daylilies bloom their very best. I'll show you the simple things they need come August to stay strong and beautiful. It's starting right here. Stay with me.